Welcome to Talk Art. I'm Sally Rain, and I'll be your host as we delve into the world of the artist and the art that's all around us. Talk Art is sponsored by the Silicon Valley Open Studios. During the first 3 weekends in May, hundreds of local artists open their studios to the public. For information, you can go to the website svos.org. Our guest, Starr Davis, is an artist who uses a variety of media to explore her love of nature. She will be demonstrating clay monoprinting, and she will show us paintings and sculptures that all embrace the theme of mussel shells. So welcome, Starr.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about your art. What inspires you to create?
Well, I just love being in nature and going outside. I kind of live in and out of my house. And it is a wonderful opportunity to be outside and to paint and sculpt the things that I see and share it with other people. So,
and you have this theme of mussels. It's not your only theme in your art, but you say that you keep coming back to the theme of mussel shells. What interests you about mussels?
well, mussels are just a natural for me. I found them first in Laguna Beach, and they're all the way from Alaska down to, well, they're all over the world. Actually, there are 300 different kinds of mussels.
Wow.
Many of them are freshwater mussels that are now going extinct. But when I look at the mussel shell, I'm just inspired by the shapes that it can make, like a boat shape, the concave, the convex shape, the pearly interior, and the rough outside. And it's the Pacific California mussel shell that I particularly enjoy because it's strong.
Right.
And
that's a particularly large one.
Yes, they go from 8 inches down to just little tiny babies. And they all live together as a family.
Right.
And they support each other so that they can open and close and be protected from the waves as a grouping.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it is this coloration and the texture and the strongness of it, and the mussel, it grows between the land and the ocean.
Right.
So it's a fascinating place because it's a beautiful place and it's being knocked by the waves all the time.
Yeah, it's a very rough place to live.
So yeah, it's challenging, and I also appreciate that mussels come in pairs, and no one pair is like any other pair. They're all individual.
You have a book of your paintings and other artworks that you call Starr's Mussels. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, it's a compilation of all the things that I've done with mussels. I've done many other things, but it's fun to put these together and to realize that there are different themes that I've found as I address the mussel shell. Personification, metaphors, and then just enjoying the mussel for what it is, the shapes and the colors and the way that it goes with the ocean, with the lines go with the waves of the ocean.
So you brought some images for us to take a look at and explore those ideas. So let's take a look at some of those now.
All right. So this is the cover of the book, and this is a kind of a wet-on-wet technique, and it's showing kind of the suspense of the mussel shell being born into the ocean and what's inside the book by what will happen. And here in the bottom center is an actual mussel shell glued to the paper. And then I have taken 8 different views of this particular shell, kind of a takeoff of Hokusai, who did 36 views of Mount Fuji.
Wow, and this is very realistic.
Yes, yes. And here I'm celebrating the small little mussel shell into a beautiful things and the wave formation on the bottom. And
so this is a clay sculpture.
Right, this is a technique called raku, where there's crackling, and I feel like the raku turns the clay body black, and it has a relationship to the earth, and showing the earth actually of the clay body through the glaze and the way it crackles. And this is taken from an idea in art goes through different phases, and one of them was modernism, and then we went into postmodernism and deconstruction. And there you take an idea and you break it apart and you use part of it or you don't. So the boat part of this is deconstructed, and the edge of the mussel shell, it becomes the sail. And then I've just taken a slab of clay and wound it back and forth like the ocean, only facing a different direction to support the mussel shell.
Is that an actual shell?
No.
No, it was clay.
No, it's a very large sculpture. It's about 3 feet across, and it's raku. And in this one,
beautiful.
I've taken the old piece of wood with the worn grain and rubbed against it and brought out the grain of the wood, and that has become the waves and also the growth lines on the mussel shell and the kind of clouds in the sky. And that same piece of wood was used for this raku sculpture to form the Northwest Coast Great Canoe. And the mussels here are like people, like a family, a Northwest Coast tribe family going off to the potlatch. And this is the same one that we have on display behind me, spring mussel, where I've become interested in stretching out the growth lines on the mussel shell into the water and keeping the mussel light and airy and beautiful colors.
Looks almost like the sunset in the shell.
And here I'm passionate about the mussel, so I've made it red, and that makes it have an extra dimension to it of movement. So it kind of reminded me of a speedboat dashing mussel.
Even though they're very still when they're in the light.
Yes. And when I was in Alaska, I found a mussel shell floating on the water, and so it became like the boat. And here,
this is different.
Yes, here I've taken a mold of a neighbor's child's face. I am consigned to do this by different people, and it actually broke as part of the sculpture that it was. And I have something called a bone pile, which was an idea that I got from Stephen DeStabler when I took a class from him, where I keep the things that I like that are broken and put them around. And so I took this face and put it with this plate background and also broken mussel shells, put it all together to accentuate the hair of the child flowing into the water of the sea.
That's awesome. So this is part of what you use to make the cast, right?
Right. I have the person lay down. I
Well,
cover
you
them.
have a video that we
Yes,
can see
yes, yes.
making this and showing how it works. So let's take a look
Right.
at that
So
now.
you see here how this is the inside of the face.
And here's the video.
So here, this friend of mine wanted her to be made into the Little Prince, the Rose from the musical The Little Prince. And this is how I put the cardboard around the face. The face is covered with Vaseline. And then I put plaster all over the face, leaving a little place to breathe. Take it off, and then she has to wash up. And then I press clay into the plaster mold, take it out, and she wanted to be a rose, so I'm adding the different petals to it, and then firing it, adding different things to it. The story is about stars and the fox and an airplane, and those all appear as part of.
That's amazing. How long does she have to sit there to make it?
Oh, it only takes 5 minutes.
Oh, really? The
yes,
plaster dries that
the
quickly?
plaster dries right away on the face, but then she has to sit there just a little bit longer in order to make it hard enough to lift off
Right.
without
So it's not a
cracking.
forever kind of thing.
No. And I usually tell a story at the same time.
That's good. Well, that's beautiful. I really like the mixture of imagery that you put on that with the fox and the rose.
Thank
Beautiful.
you. Thank you. That was what she wanted.
Yeah, so you have more mussel images for us. So
Yes,
we're
we're just-
halfway through the book now.
Right.
Let's take a look at some more.
All right. So, and the top of a mussel shell is the inside where the mussel joining the two shells goes together, and that reminded me of a moon shape. And so here I have just taken the top and made that into this rising mussel. And here, the shell itself, when you look at it, looks like the curve of a wave. And so I've just sort of inserted that into the canvas, and it becomes part of the wave, and the clouds are like the silver lining of clouds. And this is an homage to my mother, who wrote in her diary in 1943, my most vivid impression of 1943 was reading about the Nazis' treatment of an expected Jewish mother in a concentration camp. At the time of her labor contractions, they bound her legs. And so here I have bound the mussel and the small little mussel, and in homage to the mother. And a mussel cannot live if it's bound. It opens its shell slightly and has little feelers that come out and cleans the air and clean the ocean. And on the top is this quote from my mother.
Wow.
This one refers to marriage, pairs of couples, and the top one says like an old shoe, where the mussels to me kind of reminded me of very comfortable old shoes. And the second one says soulmates, a harmonious marriage where they fit together, and it's a sun-bleached mussel. And the last one is open marriage, and it's empty. Here is molding my story. The idea is that the mussel is a bivalve and opens up, scissors open up, a book opens up, and also that we're all writing our own stories.
Interesting.
And so I'm cutting the shape of my book into a mussel shell. And this is another book. It's made by using a mold and different colored slips, and there is a mussel shell over to the right and wings, which the books give you wings to see things, and the shape of the book is like a wave.
Beautiful.
And this is a clay monoprint. And here I've taken the growth lines of the mussel shell and related them to the waves of the sea. And here I've taken little chips of paint and scattered them around. And the mussel shell is a lowly little ordinary thing. And yet, by looking at the barnacles and things that deposit themselves on it, it reminded me of looking out at the stars and the shape of a galaxy. And here I've done more with the little flecks of paint, making it so that the mussel shell is almost dispersing and, in my mind, very spiritual. And, you know, they say that we're a lot of air and just little things between it. And so this is sort of like a limitless, airy, wonderful feeling looking at the shell.
Makes me think of the mussel turning into sand.
Oh, yes.
So you have a demonstration of clay monoprints for us. Let's take a look at that.
All right.
What is all of this?
Well,
what are you going to do here?
in many of these, a series that I've done recently with mussels, I have taken slices of clay and put them together and marbleized the clay.
So you're using a wire to cut it.
So I'm cutting a slice of the clay and putting it down, and then a slice of dark colored clay.
Is it a different type of clay, or is it similar?
It's got a lot more iron to it, so it will be contrast. And now I'm going to take a little thicker slice of the white because the iron tends to be
So you're kind of layering them?
right.
Oh, interesting.
Right. And what you have to do is then bang them together and stretch them out. And I won't, it's so noisy, I won't do it. But what happens is that the clay stretches way out. Then you cut it, and it's banded, and you put these two layers together, and you continue to stretch it out. And I've done that here, and you can see
so it gets thinner and there's
thinner
lots
and
lots
stretched
of
out, and you
layers.
keep adding more layers.
It looks like a mussel shell.
And
Look at that.
then you can take this and cut it again, nice and sharp, and you can bend them around, and you'll go like this.
Wow.
And cut it, and you have a mussel shell.
And so for the clay monoprint,
And so what I've
what
done
do you do?
with these, this is the slab of clay. I'll put this aside now. And also you can use the marbled clay to do something like this.
So
which
this
I've
is a
made
sculpture that you
Yeah,
made.
a sculpture of
Beautiful.
a mussel shell.
So you prepare the clay in layers, and you have, oh, I see right here.
So
That's
this
a
is
layer of
a
the
slab
clay.
of clay that's embedded in a wooden frame.
Okay.
And we have to keep it moist. So we spritz it. And I've been working on this one. So I have already embedded into the clay the marbleized clay of the mussel shells. And I've recently come back from a trip to Morocco. So I decided to make these Moroccan mussels. And there are lots of palm trees in Morocco. So there are sea palms in the ocean.
There you go, yes.
So I've
They're edible.
taken some stencils to make the background. And the background is Moroccan themes, added the sea palms. And
Why don't you show us a little bit about how that works?
so how you do it is you can take a stencil like this, and you can take,
So this is the stencil.
yes,
Okay.
and this is white clay mixed with water, and then you have different colors. And so here we have a green, and we put the stencil down and paint on here. And I'm using a stencil of a wave design.
So you're actually painting with the clay,
Right, on
and you're
here.
painting on the piece of paper as an example? Would you normally be
So
painting on the...
the reason I'm not doing it on here, which I certainly could, is that when you put it on here, it takes a long time to dry.
Oh, okay.
And so this speeds it up considerably. So also another interesting thing that I like to do is like that one design that we saw called Ripples. I can paint on here like this with the gooey clay called slip.
Is
And
this
then-
any special type of paper?
This is newsprint.
Just newsprint.
And then I can take my favorite little painter's tool, and I can make a wave design like that.
So you just scrape the clay away.
Right. Then you wait for this to lose its sheen. And here I've already made a wave design for you, and because this would take just a little while
Oh, look
to...
at that. So you have the stencil, and it's raised. I can see that there's
Yeah,
clay on
right,
there.
Right. And then I can take this and cut it out however I want to.
Oh, interesting. So that's clay on the paper.
Right. And cut this out. And then I will put this onto here. And I thought that this needed a little light down here.
Yeah.
Something light to bring it in. So I'll put this down on here. I'll take a little piece of newsprint to flatten it, because we're going to transfer this whole thing to a piece of paper with a monoprint.
So it needs to be wet so that the clay will mix together?
Will lift,
Yeah.
and we also have to flatten this and transfer this onto there. Now I might have gotten this a little too wet and it might smear, but in the interest of going ahead, now we're going to take a pastry roller and transfer this right on.
Interesting. So you're pressing the clay into the already wet clay layers that you have
Right,
already.
right.
Interesting.
And we'll make it all consistent.
How many layers would you say are in this already?
Oh gosh. And now we'll take a needle tool and lift off and see if we have transferred it.
Oh, look. It looks like it.
Yeah. So there we have it. And it did smear because it was a little too wet. But I think it's the way I like it now. So a person wouldn't have to take this whole thing. They could just do part of it if they wanted to. But I think I like the whole thing. So I'm using something, some of this tape that you can just get at the hardware store, and I'm putting this down so that I can get nice clean edges. Sometimes it's fun to have rough edges, but I'm going to use clean ones now.
So you would do that to all of the sides. We don't have
Yeah.
time to do it to all of the sides, but you would, and then what would you do after
And
it's done?
then I would take my paper, my special polyester paper called Remay, and spray that like this, put it down with the rest of the tape
Right, it
there,
would be straight edged.
and roll it, and roll it on
Excellent.
here. Yeah.
And then you would lift it up
And
right
then
away.
I'd lift it up, it would all be transferred after I rolled it down,
That would be your print.
and it would turn into one of these.
Well, you have some images for us to take a
Yes,
look
you
at.
can see
we
of
have
other
about
ones that I've
2
done.
minutes left, so let's take a look at them. So these are all monoprints.
Right, and this is done with this same, you see, because this design is on the, is pressed in with this marbled clay, it remains on there, and the background changes.
Yeah,
So
look
I've
at
done these different designs, still using the same marbled clay as a background.
Shrouded mussels. Beautiful. They're becoming more abstract, it looks like.
Yeah, and this is with seaweed.
So these are
Nice.
stencils that you've created.
And here's another Moroccan one with the different buildings and mussel middens. We all have been having mussels since native Indians, and this is a linear like calligraphy. This one has sparkly
Sparkly blue. That's beautiful.
with it.
Thank you so much for being on Talk Art. I really enjoyed learning about the mussels and all of the wonderful tools that you use to create your clay prints.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.